event. Yeah, a little bit about me. I went to Riverdale Country School, which is a private school in the Bronx, New York, from K through 12. So that was 13 years of being in an independent school, and kind of just dealing with that and making my way through that institution. And I am a new alum now, so I feel like this is, now that I'm on the other side, I have a little bit, I guess, of insight and a little bit to say about, how that has been so far. Yeah, I'm a avid Black feminist. I am an artist. I'm a writer, recently self-published author. And yeah, I've just been up to all sorts since I got to college, and I'm really excited to be here with you all.
I love you. My name's Adia Santos. I'm currently a freshman at Syracuse University. I'm majoring in political science and hopefully get to major with broadcast journalism as well. And I minor in African American Studies and Religion. And I also went to a private school in the Bronx. I went to Fieldston from K through 12, where I'm also now an alumni. It's kind of weird, but it's kind of great because I get to connect people to Syracuse and get to kind of understand more of what I was going through from an outside lens, especially considering I know Alon's also very well connected to students that still go there, like trying to engage with them about the college process and stuff like that now too. So yeah, also an avid Black feminist and writer and Pan-Africanist. So.
Hi, and I'm Trina Gary. I am the parent of 3 independent school graduates. I have worked in 4 independent schools, 9th through 12th grade, schools, both in boarding and day environments. I've been an administrator in these schools, serving as Associate Dean of Faculty, Director of Multicultural Ed, taught English and History, and Associate Director of Admissions over my tenure. I currently now consult. I have my own consultancy, Brown Gary Consultants, where I go into independent schools and I do immersive climate assessments for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then from that, schools will often put together a strategic plan for this work, which will often lead to hiring someone as the DEI director to do the work. So that's sort of what I do, my day kind of job. My heart and my love and a lot of my energy now, though, goes to my nonprofit Independent Trust, which is a professional network of independent school alumni of color. We have alumni who are connected with us from throughout the country and also international now as our alumni leave and move on. And so we've got alumni in Canada as well as in Austria who are connected to Independent Trust. Independent Trust was founded about 3 years ago. Our network is growing. We have now taken our monthly sort of meetings that we have and events that we were in the process of doing before COVID to an online format. And basically what our focus has been is to build our community by providing opportunities for professional growth, by bringing people of color together to support one another as mentors and sponsors, as friends. So we're connecting potential employers while also providing opportunities for our alumni to learn from each other and expand their skills. So we'll talk more about that. It's nonprofit. Our alumni do not currently pay a membership. We find sponsors. There are independent schools that will sponsor us as well as we will have sponsors from corporations and law firms that want to meet and talk to our students, our graduates who might be interested in law school. So that's who we are. And I want to say before I go, here is Elon's book.
Oh, I didn't know you had it.
Yes, I do. A Black Girl's Guide to PWS, because that's one of the other things that I do is we want to promote and support the work that our alumni is doing. And so I make it my business to find out what we're doing and to share it.
Thank you so much.
And
I really appreciate that. Awesome. Okay. Well, I guess to start off, we could chat a little bit about maintaining alumni connections, Adia, how you've been doing that, how I've been doing that, and also how you, Trina, do that, especially through your foundation organization, which I think is so fantastic. So I don't know who wants to start, but.
Go ahead, Adia.
I can start. I mean, Pretty recently, I've just been trying to help students up into Fieldston kind of handle the college process, because I know our grade, like the senior year that just graduated, had a larger population of Black students in our grade specifically. So we use kind of like the old Bridge to Bridge program, which was a way for students of color to kind of connect between the high school and the middle school, and at times the lower school. We kind of use that network as a way for us to stay connected after we graduate from Fieldston. Um, and we kind of established an organization called Students of Color Matter in my last year, because we had a lockdown and a protest, and had to get our administration on board with a couple of the things that we were trying to do for a couple of years there. So we now also use the Students of Color Matter network to navigate with students in high school and figure out kind of what's going on there, and have realized that a lot of the problems, even that I had in high school, still happen in college, and I'm sure they will never end because of the world that we live in. But yeah, just pretty much checking in on each other, making sure that we're all aware of what's happening and trying to help each other through it.
With Independent Trust, alumni find us through the network. So they can find us through Facebook, through connecting with other alumni, as well as through our website. And what we do is we have events and speakers, and often our speakers are alumni themselves with expertise in a particular field, and they'll come and share that expertise. So for most of last year, our meetings were focused on the value of serving on a board and how to be an effective member of a board. One of the things that we know is, and I'll just go back a little bit to say that what inspired me to create Independent Trust and to found this organization was the work that I had done in schools, working in boarding schools and in independent private day schools. What I found was that there were numbers of alumni who would graduate and maintain contact, who would call about, wanting information or advice on, medical school or law school or graduate programs or places when they got older to send their children, what was happening in independent school world, what schools was walking the talk. So everything, do you know any good doctors who live in this area? I'm moving to this area. Do you know any good, the neighborhoods I should look at? And speaking with some of my colleagues from other independent schools who was doing DEI work, one of the things I noticed was that we were all getting these kinds of calls. And in working in these schools and knowing that there wasn't a lot of effort spent on cultivating relationships with alumni of color and maintaining contact. And yet I was also sitting in boardrooms where people were trying to figure out why alumni aren't engaged, alumni aren't coming back. And of course, doing this work, experiencing some of the challenges that our students have when they're in these predominantly white institutions that are not been built for them. So if we're not in cultivating those relationships, building those relationships when they're in school, while they're on our campuses, then it's no surprise that maintaining those relationships post-graduation isn't going to happen on its own. So what I wanted to do was first make sure that we weren't losing students between, in the cracks. I was really concerned about the number of students who perhaps were graduating from our schools and who were not graduating from college. Who was keeping track of that? Who was monitoring that? Who knows that? And what I found in many of our schools, when I would go into the offices and say, listen, alumni, do you know who your alumni of color are and where they are and how we can engage them and bring them back to campus for events? And there was a lot of confusion as to how do we identify that, because people weren't keeping track or keeping record. And so oftentimes to do so required getting student volunteers to go through yearbooks and looking at the yearbooks to try to identify visually who the people of color were, and then forming those lists from that. I said, we can do better.
That's fantastic. As a new alum, a freshman, I've definitely been trying to figure out what my relationship is going to be to Riverdale, my alma mater. Recently, I think it's hard because I'm so close to Riverdale still. I barely left. I've barely been off campus for like a year now. It'll be like a year in this month, June, that I've like graduated, which is kind of crazy. And yeah, I think as a student of color, I personally need a lot of time to heal from my experiences at Riverdale. Not that I don't love Riverdale, not that I don't want to see it flourish, not that I don't want to go back and continue to maintain, as I am, relationships with students of color specifically who still go there. But, you know, being back on campus and wanting to kind of like, you know, keep those relationships with teachers especially, it's hard because it's like I need to step away from this place for a little bit to kind of like see who I am in a different space and grow. But I think for me right now, what has been the most important is really just staying in contact with students, people who are students of color who are still there, who were my friends, who were my support groups while I was at Riverdale, who were the only reflections that I had of myself. And so making sure that I try and stay in their lives, whether that just be like always commenting on their posts on social media, always giving them big ups, always making sure that they're doing okay, how they are, how they're feeling at Riverdale, how things are going. I'm still a part of my like Black Student Association group chat. So I see everything that they're doing all the time, all the little events that they're setting up and the things that they're doing at school. So that's been a really great way for me to stay connected. But yeah, so for me, that's really honestly the most important thing is really just keeping track of them and to let them know that even though I'm not there anymore, even though I'm not still on campus doing that work with them, I'm still, you know, out in the world and I still care about them and want to know how they're doing and want to maintain those relationships. But I think as an alum, it's really important that we take the time to heal because we had a teacher at my school, Cameron Clark, who was an alum of Riverdale and came back to do a teaching fellowship, which was like a 2-year sort of thing. And she, as she was starting to teach with us and basically just talking with students and becoming a mentor that we all sort of need because we don't have enough Black female teachers or Black teachers in general at Riverdale. She realized how little unpacking she had done of her own experience at Riverdale and how that was almost traumatic for her to be to come back into the space without having done that work. And I think that that's often what happens is that students of color get out of these traumatic spaces. Yes, they've had great academic achievements. Yes, they got into college. Yes, they're, you know, they've kind of made these sorts of inroads, but they haven't sort of dealt with the negative aspect of like, I guess, having gone to a PWI. And because of that, it becomes very unsafe to come back into these spaces at a later point in life because it brings up a lot of the stuff that we hadn't worked through yet. And so for me, I've been really trying to take it upon myself to make sure that I work through that, you know, that I take the adequate time to heal and to kind of reflect on my experience at Riverdale in order for me to come back in an effective way. Because if I don't heal, then I can't come back and make effective change and come back and support, you know, younger students who are doing work and say like, and to really give my full self to them. I can't do that unless I'm, you know, working on myself and my relationship with Riverdale. So I think that's pretty much where I'm at as far as like being an alum right now.
And you know what, Elon, what you said is what I hear again and again, and even on the survey that we have on our website. And that is that students who may not be ready to go back to their school, but who do want to be in community with others, other folks of color who've shared their experiences, they come to Independent Trust for that reason. They find that they can still have that. And then what I say, you know, what I'm often referred to as building the sort of resolve and the muscle really to then go back and make the change and the impact or be part of that, that can help to transform the culture in these places. One of the things I always say is that we don't realize our collective power, and we don't realize the collective power that independent school graduates of color have. And now with the shifting demographics, schools are realizing that they're going to have to find a way, if they are going to remain viable, to reach out, to attract, and to yield more families of color in their schools. And they're going to need the help of their alumni to do that. And alumni have the power and the ability to be heard in ways that the adults of color in that community may find more challenging. because you are truly a part of those communities. And so one of the things that we talk about is how can we be more strategic and how we use our collective power and expertise to bring about the change that the mission statements often say they are all about. So to help them realize those mission statements.
So another part of this is talking a little bit about what legacy means to each of us and the importance of that as an alumni. Yeah, so if we kind of want to bounce off of that for a little bit.
Well, to me, legacy isn't necessarily being remembered. I know we talk about it a lot in a way that's like being remembered in your communities for stuff that you were doing, which is great and it's important, but I think it's more of building a sort of concrete foundation that furthers society in a way that makes it possible for people to walk after you had to run, just so to speak. And like, it actually means influencing and creating structural change that helps or helped generations after you just go further than you did. So I know that legacy for me in high school meant a lot, from kids that were 4 and 5 years older than us that had to do a lot of things at Fieldston so we could simply just live and exist there in a more comfortable way. And then that allowed us to push the boundaries even further in a way that makes actual tangible opportunities for more kids there now to be able to have that.
Yeah, I feel that 100%. That honestly spoke to me so much because, especially looking at Fieldston, because y'all were running your senior year, y'all were running. And I think that, that's what students of color at these schools feel so compelled to do. It's like, if I'm not going to do this right now, then who else is going to do this? Like, I have to put in this work because I don't see the adults in my community putting in this work, largely because there's not a lot of faculty of color, because when faculty of color are on the campus, they're putting in that work double time, even if it's not their role. I kid you not, like we had a teacher at my school who was in the IT department, yet she's helping put on all of these diversity events that would not otherwise happen at the school if she didn't step up to do that. So that's, I think, really what legacy is about, is helping to do that work, but at the same time definitely creating that sort of infrastructure to make sure that like the school as an institution is doing that work after you leave. Because I know that my senior year, that was like a big, I think, dilemma for me. Like when it came time for senior speeches, I was like, okay, I could give the clean and simple senior speech that was like, oh, like Riverdale, I grew so much here, like, so happy to graduate and I can't wait to come back, but I'm looking forward to the future. Or I could be brutally honest and say, this was my experience here, and I don't want any other students of color who are coming up behind me to feel like they have to give this sort of speech their senior year. That is literally sternly asking your school to kind of give you the basic recognition and resources that you need as a student of color to recognize that like your students here are hurting. Like, how do you as an institution have students that you are not supporting? Like, how do you, especially at places as small as our schools are? Because like when I got to college, I was like, damn, Riverdale's small. Like that was so tiny. And if the fact I took for granted that I saw my head of school almost every day, I took for granted that I saw the head of the high school almost every day. Because now that I'm at college, like I don't think I've ever seen Christina Paxson in person. I've certainly never seen Rashid Zia in person except for at commencement. So I was like, whoa, I really took for granted the fact that they were so close in proximity. But then I also have to realize, like, if you're that close in proximity and still not listening quite while we're talking, like that's a problem. And so for me, I guess my senior year really was me saying like, I think I really need to be open and honest because I'm about to graduate. So there's not going to be any quote unquote consequences to me saying this and being honest. So I'm hoping that a lot of what I did and said had a lasting effect and change. And I know it probably made a lot of other students of color feel a lot more comfortable to say what they need to say and to expect that they are heard when they say it. But I think also as an alum, it's also harder to like see after you've done all of that work, some things like regress a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably been the hardest thing for me.
Should we take questions
Yes.
now?
I was just about to get that from me.
For sure.
So if you have any questions, please. I'm looking through the chat. It's just really bigs up for the book. And I'm really impressed by just listening to, I'm putting my camera on because it's weird just talking to myself. I'm really impressed by hearing what you guys have to say because I work at a private school as well. And I work actually in the tech department. So when you were sharing that, when you were sharing that story that tech person is the only one that does the people of color slideshows or those events to bring around those that space, I felt like it was talking to me because I was like, that's what I do. And I hope that the students I'm trying to help, they realize that I didn't have to do it. I could have just stayed in my lane, but I did it because I understand what they're going through and being the only or the other and just trying to connect in that way. So, we have a question. Trina, what is the relationship between people of color alumni giving and leveraging legacy changes? Have you seen in action?
Very good question. I would say that, yes, in a way, I've seen it in some institutions. The relationship, for me, with respect to POC alumni giving is schools like to talk about talents, giving in talent, treasure, and time. I've also heard it, an additional T added to that, and that is in truth. And so as people of color, thinking about our giving with respect to talents, treasure, time, and truth, and that is being authentic and sharing about those authentic experiences are gifts that we give to schools that are in the place to hear it so that they can then use that information to improve their the experience there for students of color and for all students basically. So in terms of giving and philanthropy, schools are realizing that there is a need to build relationships in order for that to happen. But I think all too often there's the assumption that communities of color don't give. And because they don't give, they often are not invited to the table or are perceived to be not as invested and engaged. And so sometimes are overlooked. When I talk to alumni, and I ask them to what degree have they been engaged in their school and what does giving and connection look like for them, they will say to me, oh, I give all the time. I give to my graduate school, or I give to my undergraduate school, or I give to nonprofits that I value, but I haven't given to my independent school because they haven't asked. They haven't asked. I think that, so I hope I answered that question. Schools where I've seen it are schools where you also will tend to see actively engaged alumni of color who are serving on the boards, who are also actively engaged in alumni councils, and who may have legacy of children that are going to those schools, and those families are known.
Well, thank you. I have a question. We have a question for the two alums. Have you encountered shame sharing your independent school experience? Oh, that's the timer. Hold on. Have you encountered shame sharing your independent school experience with people you meet in college?
Shame, I don't think so. Sometimes I'm embarrassed a little bit, but not really, only because I find that Syracuse is very, very, very similar, like as similar as it could have gotten out of a university to Fieldston. I feel like they're very similar. So just as a quick example, we had a lockout my senior year of high school. It was 4 days. My first semester at Syracuse, I co-organized a lockout that was 9 days. And then this past semester, we had a 30-day lockout. So I don't find that too many of my experiences are actually different enough from high school to be like shameful or embarrassed by sharing them. But I do find that the embarrassment part comes in part by being in a larger community of Black students on campus that went to either public schools or schools with primarily Black and brown students, where they have kind of a shared understanding of community that I haven't been able to experience. But that is just a different kind of experience that sometimes is difficult to explain to them, because I'm either seen sometimes as like the whiter Black student from like a whiter school or something like that. So that I'm at times very slightly embarrassed just within myself, but I'm never shameful or embarrassed of who I am in any capacity. So
Yeah, I what I've found actually is that I've just not wanted to talk about it, honestly. Like, I just kind of want to like not say that it didn't happen or anything like that, but I just kind of want to move on with my life. Like, that's where I'm at right now. And not that I'm not reconciling with it and reflecting on it within myself, but as far as like, I was so excited to go to college because it was like, I'm not at Riverdale anymore. You know, I'm starting a new chapter of my life. I'm getting to flourish and grow into new parts of me in a way that I couldn't at that school. So for me, it's been like, okay, yes, do need to unpack this, and it's an ongoing process, but right now I really just want to focus on who this new person is that I'm growing into, this new extension of myself in this new space with these wonderful new people. I'm hanging out and being with more Black and brown people than I ever have before. And that's also like, brown is a PWI, but it's just like a lot bigger than Riverdale ever was. So like the same like number of like brown people that were at Riverdale is just like multiplied at Brown, just because it is a bigger school. And yeah, and so I've just really enjoyed being there and meeting those new people and just like feeling loved and seen in a way that I haven't before. Not to say that Brown doesn't have its spaces that I steer fully left from, because it's like, I just don't need to be around that. But yeah, so it's less about shame and more just that I've just needed to put that experience aside for the moment to kind of fully get the most out of specifically my freshman year in college.
And we have a question from Mel. A special shout out to the two alums, and that you both know the son, Elijah. So the question is, with Elijah still being in high school, and while Adia, you and the rest of the BSLM did a lot of running last year, how can we, Elijah and his caregivers, continue the amazing fight while we're still there beyond what's already there? And also, it's a two-part question. Actually, it's a three-part question. Get ready, honey. Also, would you want your kids to go to an independent school? If so, how would you support them? Should I reread it again?
no, it's okay. Alon, do you want to answer first?
Oh,
I could go.
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead, please. I need to think a little bit.
Well, I think just trying to, holding our administration still accountable to the things that they said they've agreed to, because even while we were still there were things where we had deadlines that they didn't agree to, and we were still there, and we had just had them sign the contract that they did. So just making sure they keep applying pressure, but also trying to kind of build more of the Black and POC communities on campus, and making sure that we really have a strong and united community, because one of my regrets is not having solidified our community more while trying to hold our school accountable while I was still there. So making sure that students that, like Black families and other families that decide to come to school, know that there's a community there waiting for them, and that's a resource that they have once they're already on campus. So just making sure we still have that. To answer the second question, I literally think about this every single day of my life. I ideally, in my ideal world where I'm at the age of maybe having kids, that's a strong maybe, I would want them to go to an independent school that's for students of color. That is my ideal world, is me being able to somehow do that in this lifetime, so that I could have a better field thin for people that look like us. So that's what I want. But in the event that that's not possible, I probably would still send them there. at a certain age, and I say that to answer the third question also, because I want to be able to support them and make sure they have an understanding before they get there of who they are and how they might be seen while they're there. This is because I also really do value having struggled and having had the experiences I did after going to an independent school, because like I just explained to my father, I've been protesting for a couple days with everything that's going on, and I'm very passionate and opinionated about how I feel about the way certain protests are happening, and the way that we need to shift things in this country. But like I said to my father this morning, I feel like our school gave me a specific and quality amount of cultural literacy in the way that even when I'm my most passionate and I might come off as aggressive or opinionated, I can translate that in a way that's malleable and tangible for people that might not understand. And I only got that skill and amount of cultural literacy from coming from an independent school. So I think for me, it gave me kind of a way to, as much as we shouldn't have to be able to translate whatever I want to say to all the different demographics and group of people I might encounter.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna cut this off a little short. I'm so sorry that
Oh, I'm sorry I spoke so long.
Oh no. This is just because we were waiting and setting up, and I have people I think coming in for the next session, which is 3:45, which we could just continue that question as well. So I am going to, I believe, if you could just say your last 5 seconds or 10 seconds answer, and then we can end this and then start part 2. Does that work, Elon?
Oh yeah, sure. Oh wow. Okay.
You could just
I'm
answer
just
the
gonna
last
answer like
part.
the last part. Yeah. I'm totally on Adia's train right now with that. Like, ideally, by the time I even consider having kids, which is a long way off because I want a whole career established by that point, that we have independent schools that are predominantly students of color. Like, we are the majority at those schools, if not schools totally for us. But in the event that's not possible, I think I definitely would send my kid to an independent school. And I think that because I am more knowledgeable now about the things that I needed when I was at Riverdale, and thus could give that to my child later on. Like, my parents did a great job, but again, they didn't go to a Riverdale, And so now that I have that experience about like what they did right and things that they could have worked on a little bit more, I could do that for my child. So I would just have to make sure that they 100% had the village that I will have by the time that I'm bound to have kids, to help them and support them through that process.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This was the first session. Thank you, ladies. You guys were amazing. And good luck in everything else. I don't know how to really end this because it keeps on going. But yeah. I'm going to now just add on, and we can just start from fresh, from the beginning. Just going to add the people in the waiting room. And we're just gonna go over like we did before from the start. If everybody was here from the first session, that was from 3 to 3:40. Now it's 3:44. We have 1 more minute until the new session starts. And then we'll get 20 minutes of talking, same schedule, 20 minutes of talking, and then like the last 10 minutes of just questions and answers if possible. Okay. All right. And once again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I will try my best to look at the time and then look at the chat and do my best. All right.
Also, a reminder to anybody who's still here from the last session, definitely leave this chat and go to another session so you get the opportunity to see some new speakers and some new people. So yeah.
Right. That part.
Virtual is hard.
I never knew. I never knew. I was like, this is work. Oh, man.
Some people are doing it all day.
Oh, bless their soul. Bless them.
I'm very glad to be out of school.
Okay, so let's see.
Did the chat reset itself?
No.
No.
I think it just kind of stays.
Yeah.
I'm just going off a timestamp, so I'm just seeing what other questions are coming off of after 3:44 or 3:45, which is now. So once again, if you were here at the first session, that was like from 3:10 or 3 o'clock to 3:45 just now. You may go to another session. There's a list in the virtual lobby where you can have all your Zoom codes and Zoom links for those meetings. So right now we are starting our second session for the Legacy and Alumni Networks. Thank you. Go ahead.
Want to start in the same order?
Yeah, that works fine.
Is Elon frozen? She might be.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So
Go ahead, start.
I'll start. Hi, everybody. My name is Trina Gary, and I am the founder of Independent Trust, which is a professional network of independent school graduates of color. I'm a parent of 3 independent school graduates, and I've worked on independent school campuses, 4 different schools, all secondary schools, both in boarding and day environments. I've been an administrator, Associate Dean of Faculty and Director of Multicultural Education at these different schools. I've taught English, also the constant thing that I've done at all schools. I've also taught history, and in the earlier part of my career, I was Associate Director of Admissions. I've also done leadership training, as well as I'm on the Summer Institute of Diversity Directions, and I serve on a couple of school boards. Welcome. I'm looking forward to this session.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adia Santos. I am a recent alumni of Fieldston here in the Bronx. I'm currently a freshman at Syracuse University, and I'm majoring in political science, hopefully soon a double major with broadcast digital journalism, and I double minor in African American studies and religion. I'm also an avid activist, been participating in some of the protests going on in the city that are happening around the country as well. Yeah, and I'm a writer and a Black feminist and, and a Pan-Africanist and all that, so. And Elon is probably coming back.
Elon is here. I'm getting her camera. And hold on. So where is she?
There she is.
There she is. And then I had to just make sure she is unmuted. There we go.
Sorry, I had a bit of a Wi-Fi meltdown.
So we were doing introductions.
Oh, okay, cool. Hi, I'm Elon. Did everybody go?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm Elon Collins, daughter of Gina Parker Collins, who's running this event. I am currently a freshman at Brown University, and I just graduated last year from Riverdale Country School. I was there K through 12. So I'm a recent and new alum, kind of exploring this world of, maintaining connections. And so, yeah, it's been quite an experience. I am currently undeclared at Brown, looking into gender and sexuality studies. My interests mostly lie in Black feminism, writing, art, and yeah, I recently self-published a book of poetry and art, which is kind of like where my interests lie. And yeah, I'm just really happy to be here with you all. I guess to start, we can just kind of go over the same things that we were going over last time, which was like how it is that we are all maintaining alumni connections currently, and also for you, Trina, how it is that you facilitate that through Independent Trust.
So with Independent Trust, we have alumni find us through either Facebook page, through connections with alumni who are connected to Independent Trust, and we have a website. So I encourage anyone who's on this call who is an alum to check us out and to join Independent Trust. We currently do not charge any membership for Independent Trust. We find sponsors for our events. Our sponsors can be corporate sponsors for events that we have hosted or host. Our sponsors can also be independent schools and other organizations, nonprofits that want to support and sponsor our alumni and our events. Our events are meant to be sort of bringing folks together to network professionally, but also there's a lot of social contact. So before COVID, we would meet at different places and we would have a topic. For about a year, we were focusing on the value of serving on boards and bringing in alumni who serve on various different boards. And they spoke about how to be an effective member of the board, and then providing networking support to others who were interested in being on boards and connecting them with potential boards. So that's sort of how we maintain connections since we've been on the online platform. It's been nice because our West Coast members, we have independent trust members from throughout the country. And in the past, we've done regional meetings. Now we have been able, this has provided us an opportunity to have more national impact. And we've had West Coast people coming in, meeting online, everyone else who is meeting on the East Coast on our time zone. And again, the conversations have been rich, sharing stories, experiences, but also focusing on mentorship. And so we've been talking about mentorship and sponsorship, and really important now to build those networks, particularly given this economy and such loss of jobs.
I can go. So for me, currently maintaining alumni connections has really mostly been happening from me to students who are still students and haven't graduated yet at Riverdale. For me, I feel like that's like where I am emotionally at with my relationship to Riverdale. As an alum and as a new alum, and I've spoken to other Riverdale alums, it's really important to kind of make sure to distance yourself from your school for a little bit, just to kind of unpack your experience there and to kind of heal from it. Because as Dina kind of so eloquently said in the opening, is that there's like a lot of, we pay a pretty large price, I think, to go to independent schools. And so it's really important for students of color to be able to reflect on and unpack that experience once they've graduated for their own health, and so that they can come back to their schools as effective alumni. And so that's kind of what I'm doing right now, just because I'm just a year out. But I really have loved watching students who are juniors come into fruition as seniors and who are graduating now, unfortunately under such horrible conditions. I don't know what I would have thrown a fit if this had happened last year and I did not get to walk that stage. I would not have been happy at all. So I cannot imagine what they're feeling right now. But yeah, so that's really what I've loved doing, seeing the things that they have been up to since I've been gone. I still keep in contact with our school's Black Student Association. I'm still on the group chat, which is really cute to see what they're doing. And, also answering any questions students have about the college process, like how I'm enjoying my own university, and, any recommendations that I have for, how to figure out where they want to go. And so, yeah, that's definitely how I've been choosing to maintain connections as of right now.
I mean, mine are pretty similar only because I'm also barely a year out. My alumni connections have mostly come in the form of talking to most of the seniors when they were applying to college about the college process and where to go also, and kind of the similarities and differences in PWIs, or after graduating from a PWI, making the decision to go to an HBCU or another PWI. And also, my senior year, we formed a group called Students of Color Matter that held a lockdown at Fieldston, and it's still an active group on campus to hold our administration accountable and making sure that they're keeping up on the promises that they made before. So yeah, most of our alumni connections, I'm still in all those group chats too, which is cute. We just get to make sure that we're checking in on each other, making sure everybody's good with their mental health, because that's something that's really neglected at Fieldston for Black students specifically, and making sure that they're reaching back out to younger students as well.
Okay. So our next sort of talking point is again what legacy means to us.
Go ahead, alumni.
You can go, Adia.
Okay. I said this in the last session, but it still holds true. To me, a legacy doesn't necessarily mean being remembered specifically like you in a school, but mostly it's more about contributing to or having built like a concrete foundation that furthered society in a way that made it possible for those after you to walk when you had to run. Then it means influencing and creating structural change that actually helps generations after you, or helped people to kind of go further than you did and push the boundaries a little bit more than you could have.
Yeah, 100% what Adia said. And in addition to that, again, just like making sure students have the resources that you didn't have. I think for me, in my last few years at Riverdale, it was really important to me that like I left the place better than I found it. All the things that I was struggling with and like was mucking through was just a little bit better, or at least that I really brought it to administration's attention, that I really made a ruckus before I left to make sure that students coming behind me, you know, could raise their voice a little bit more easily, did not have to feel so reserved, because I think that's like also the first step is feeling comfortable enough to critique in love really your institutions. I think that was something that was really difficult for me, because I said, you know, Riverdale's giving me all these wonderful opportunities, you know, they let me go here, they help me do that, and the college office is so, you know, helpful, and all of these sorts of things. And for me, in my mind, it was like that was the reason I couldn't critique Riverdale, that I couldn't, you know, point out all the things that they weren't doing really well, all the ways that they weren't supporting me and people who looked like me. And so it was really important for me in my last few years to be like, okay, no, you know, I really do care about this institution and I want it to be better, which is why I'm going to raise my voice to say, you know, y'all need to do better, do a whole lot better. And so for me, that's really what legacy was about, was making sure that I did not leave without really being completely honest and completely clear about what Riverdale hadn't been doing, what they needed to do, especially after I left, and that it would not be tolerated that they don't do those things for our students.
When I think of legacy, I think of it, you know, the one side of it, schools will say that legacy refers to those families, and I'm thinking of it in terms of that admissions lens, those families who have generations of children that have attended their schools. And one of the things that I try to emphasize with schools when I'm working with them, and certainly when I was in schools, is that we've got to sort of think about legacy as something we're focusing on, not with graduates and their families and thereafter, but from the very beginning. And that is, how are we creating an environment in our school community that recognizes that when we accept students, that we want to maintain a legacy relationship with every single student? And what is it going to take to maintain a legacy relationship with students of color who come into our school? Well, one thing is to make sure that when they're in that school, they feel visible, they feel heard, they are respected, they are understood. If that happens, and if we do that well, and we think about admitting these students, as we do, you know, students, all students, with the notion of we want to make sure that their experience is such that they want to send their children and they want their grandchildren to come, and on and on and on. So is that the mindset our schools have? So that's what I think of the concrete of examples of where I can see legacy really working.
Something that I didn't say last session that I'm, you know, really curious about, especially like, as you say that, Trina, is, yeah, definitely how schools are thinking about alumni connections and thinking about legacy. Because something that I only realized like in my last like year of Riverdale is that like, wow, private schools, they're businesses. And that's something kind of, you know, crazy to think about, that they have a board, you know, they have fiduciary responsibility, and, you know, they need to keep this place monetarily afloat. And a lot of, you know, the way that they are thinking about alumni is, you know, donations, and like, you know, are these students going to give back? And what you were saying before about like, they don't think that students of color and their communities of color that are coming out of their school are going to, you know, give back in that monetary way, and how, you know, that they need to do the work to shift their thinking about, you know, alumni connections. Like, yes, monetarily, like that is definitely important, and we do love to give back. It's important to give back in that way, but thinking about like the intellectual and cultural capital that students of color have, and how, you know, their investment in their community that way is going to bring so much more, you know, to schools. Like, you know, again, sending their children and their grandchildren there, actually telling, you know, their friends, like, you know, when they go on to become, you know, have children of their own, and their friends are looking for schools to send their children to, like, oh, please, like, I really loved Riverdale, and, you know, or at least like it wasn't the best it could have been when I was going there, but they've really done the work to improve. And, you know, and I think that would be a great place to send your child. And so, you know, I'm definitely curious to know how, you know, schools, you know, can really change their mindset about what it means to be an alum, and what they should be expecting from their alum, you know, especially going beyond just, you know, money.
Right, right.
Another thing I would add to that just made me think of something is that I had a conversation with my favorite professor in high school that extended way beyond what I could have thought when I was actually having it. So he was explaining that someone in our class had asked this question of what should want to make a problematic, let's say, PWI or institution want to engage with and bring Black and brown families into school. And he was explaining it, and I had to chip in a little bit, but he was explaining how the cultural literacy and the cultural capital we have extends way beyond our personal benefit, because it actually benefits white people and non-Black and non-POC people way, way more. Like, the way in which they gain cultural literacy from interactions and just learning with and from us has extended way beyond what they could have thought to develop their own institutions, but also makes it possible for their same white students to then leave the institution and be able to flourish in any community or any group of people that they want to. So without even having us in their institution, they're losing cultural capital. They're like losing cultural capital. They won't be able to develop cultural literacy, and it makes them actually have to challenge themselves way beyond an age where they should be questioning it, but they would have to challenge themselves further in life as to how to simply engage with and converse with different people. So that's something that's just always been in the back of my mind when I go anywhere.
It's like when you graduate, you want to say, you're welcome.
Truly.
Right. Because our schools sometimes look at us like, you're welcome, as if I should have said thank you for receiving my education. But I'm like, you know, I did a lot for you guys in my time here. You're welcome. Like, I can go now.
That's something I was saying, like, when I was graduating. Like, I should be receiving 2 degrees personally.
Right.
Like, I think that every student of color and like in the crowd right now should be receiving an additional degree as compared to their white students, because we truly added and did so much more, had to do so much more just to be in those spaces, and added so much to their communities that would not have been there. So yeah, I don't know. I think I should have a 2nd degree right now. Just saying.
Jackie, did you want to ask that question?
Yeah, I was just about to. You are on it, Trina. I love it. All right. So the question that I do have is, how do families receiving financial aid leverage their legacy relationships, either through sibling admissions or parental connections?
Okay. You know what? I want to sort of code this a little bit. And what I mean by that is kind of unpack it. Because belying this is something that we struggle with in our schools, in terms of families who are receiving financial aid feeling that they have agency or voice and can speak to some of the things that concern them about their school, and on one hand. And so first I want to say that everybody in these schools, typically most families, are paying some sort of subsidized tuition for their children to attend the schools. I mean, the tuition itself, dollars, and schools will tell you this, doesn't cover the full cost of the full price for what it costs to educate each of the children. So everybody's being underwritten to a certain degree. So starting with that, the fact that our children, and this is going right back to what Elon and both Idea was saying, the fact that our children are in these schools, right, is going to provide a truly, help to provide a truly, what I call excellent education, in that you're going to have some diversity of perspectives, experiences represented in that classroom, if it's a boarding school, in the dorms, and all of that is going to enhance everyone's learning. And it's oftentimes at the cost of some of our children who, in communities where they don't have the cultural literacy and cultural competency skills to really address some of the issues that rise for our kids in these schools. With that said, when our families allow their children to attend independent schools, and those relationships that the school has with that family, the responsibility to nurture that falls on the school's shoulders, just like it does with any, right? How do we nurture these families? How do we continue to create this, make this environment an environment that is going to be inviting more families? And then how are we responding when we do see them come through the admissions process? You know, are we responding in the same way that we respond to other families who have had siblings come through? So families receiving financial aid, as is the case with all families in terms of leveraging their legacy relationships, stay engaged, be actively, asking questions, be present to the degree that you can, and when you cannot, write. Identify the people in the building who are going to and can advocate in that space, and just continue to use your voice.
Thank you. You guys have any other questions? Please put that in the chat. Let's see if I see any other questions in here.
Also, to add on to that quickly, because this is something I hadn't really thought about until recently, just like the question that, you know, families could even feel as though they don't have a say just because they're on financial aid, which kind of like, for whatever strange reason, blew my mind. Like, it seems like a pretty, like, I don't know, logical, thought. But for me, I'm like, you know, you're on financial aid because you need the financial support, not because you're just like opting out of, like, you know, contributing to your, you know, school. So, you know, what would it matter, you know, that you're on financial aid? You know, of course you still have equal say, just as somebody who's paying full price, you know, because they have the ability to do so. But I think I was reminded of that really just because like, it's the people who do pay full price that believe that once, you know, they show their true colors, that people who are on financial aid should not have a full say as far as like the infrastructure of the school. And like, they would never admit that on the surface, but specifically when it comes to, like, you know, showing up, when it comes to like parent associations and like showing up in those sorts of ways and trying to affect change in that way, that's when they're like, oh, well, they're not even contributing fully to the community because they're on financial aid, which is complete BS, of course, as we know. And so I think, you know, not only is it important to understand that you are a full part and full member of the community, even if you are on financial aid, but it's really truly being fortified in the fact that I am a full member of this community and I can and will affect change and show up in these ways as a full parent, as a full community member. And I won't let, you know, other people say that that's not true, because like, unfortunately, like, people, like families, particularly at these schools, can be like racist and classist. And I think that, you know, when you see their tiny tots and they're, you know, in fact, you know, have, you know, microaggressing left and right all of the time, sometimes like aggressing period, you know, they learn that somewhere. They learn that from their parents, and their parents are the full grown versions of those microaggressors, those literal aggressors who are, you know, aggressing in like their workspaces, and then now coming back to school communities and aggressing in that way. So it's like, I think that that's almost the scariest part about this all, is like when they get involved and when they show their true colors about, you know, it's one thing about the administration who's just like, you know, has to be or is partisan sometimes or tries to downplay things, but, you know, parents, I feel like, really say the ugliest of things. And so I think it's really about being fortified and understanding that, you know, as a family of color, as a family of color that is on financial aid, we are full members of the community, and we will show up and show out.
Right. I couldn't agree more. Also, because just having had personal experiences in high school where a student that wasn't supposed to bring up a board conversation that they overheard their parents having decided to discuss how families on financial aid shouldn't have certain decisions about administrators being elected or people coming onto our campus, bringing that into a high school discussion, it was very apparent that children that learned these things from their parents also carried their entitlement and carried their classism in the ways that they thought we just shouldn't have as much say when we were running the clubs, we were running the organizations, we were on all of the sports teams, definitely made the school the most money. And not to say that students that pay full tuition don't value their education, but we also definitely had a different understanding of what the education meant to us when we were on financial aid. Like, we took the most out of what we were getting as possible. I remember I graduated Fieldston in 2 years. I was ready to graduate as a sophomore at the end of my sophomore year, but you have to stay for 4 years, so I did. But I ended up taking 8 classes every semester after that to be able to literally have enough credits to have graduated high school twice. So I know that we literally do the most, just to be blatant, we do the most on campus, so I've never even questioned whether or not we're full parts of our community, because we are our community.
100%.
You know, I'd also like to say, the second part of that question, either through sibling admissions or parental connections, absolutely yes. Parents can, financial aid, parents, as is the case with any other parents, can leverage those relationships by being proactive in having a conversation with someone regarding a family member's application, advocating on behalf of that person if they so choose. Also, staying engaged. There have been parents also who've been invited to serve on boards, who've been invited to come in and help with parent organization planning around events. So there are ways that parents can leverage their legacy relationships by still staying actively engaged to the degree that they want to, particularly if they see they have other children or family members that they think they would love to be able to also have that opportunity. Stay engaged, keep those lines of communication open, and make those phone calls, because that relationship is going to be helpful to the admissions department and to the schools, and particularly the schools that want to attract more families that represent racial, ethnic, socioeconomic diversity.
Yeah.
How are we doing?
Right now we have 10 minutes. No, actually more. So if there are any other questions, or would you want to talk about something else? Maybe your book, on. Maybe you could talk about some, let me just put my camera on.
You know what, there was something that came up in the big session that I would love to
talk about.
Yeah, and I would especially like Adia and Elon. I would like to hear their thoughts on this. One of the questions was, the topic was, and I think Alicia kept saying that our children need to be prepared for what they're going to experience in these schools. And so my question is, going into your independent schools, What preparation did you find really helpful to you, for you, in addressing that which you were experiencing?
Sometimes and I still question this. I'm not sure if I was prepared because I went to Fieldston in kindergarten, and I don't know if I was necessarily prepared as I was coached and taught and reassured once I was there. So I think I'm very grateful for my parents. They were fantastic. They did a great job. I think being prepared, especially when you're just Black in America, doesn't really happen. I don't think you're ever equipped. I don't think you're ever prepared for the things that you might experience or encounter. But I do think that the way my parents reacted and taught me was the most impactful. So we had probably one of the most difficult discussions you could ever have with your parents, about, what it is to be Black in a PWI when I was like 5 or 6 or 7. And it really just came from a place of love and comfort and reassurance in who I was, and more that I might not understand why what was happening, but that just as I was confused, the other students that might be perpetrating these things and doing them also don't understand. But it's about the way that they taught me about loving myself and kind of understanding that they don't know what they're doing, that was kind of the force that protected me. And I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but that's just kind of how they did that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely same. I started Riverdale in kindergarten, and so I just don't think my parents could have really ever known, what was gonna happen. My dad only went to public school, and my mom went to Catholic school, but that was also pretty different. Like it was private, but also not white to the same degree that Riverdale was. So, I think that they absolutely did their best in combating stuff once they started happening, which is again from the moment that you're there, things like children are really smart. They sense difference. They understand when they are not the same as the others. That's what we teach children in kindergarten, what color is not like the others, which one of these is not like the others. And so because of that, they're able to spot that in their own classroom. And back then there weren't really teachers of color in the lower school. The first teacher of color I had was in 3rd grade, and I loved Miss Caldwell, and she wasn't even there the whole year because she was pregnant, and so she left, and then we got a white woman, and so that was and it's just hard. And I think that what's harder is that when you're that young, you don't really know what to report back to your parents. Some things that you just, keep with you and you don't really quite say. And that kind of sticks with you for a lot. And I was a really quiet kid, so I wasn't just blabbing off to my parents, when I got home, oh, Jane did this, yada, yada. It was very much it wasn't until I got older that things started, coming up. And it was just oh my God, the thing that Julie said to me on the Hill was really uncool. And she should not have said that to me. And so I think what ended up being most helpful to me was definitely cross-grade peer-to-peer relationships. I remember when I was I think it was 1st or 2nd grade that we got 5th graders that we got buddied up with, and I was so excited, and I wanted the black girl. There was that one black girl who was in the 5th grade class, and I was just my name is at the bottom of the fishbowl. You gotta pick my name, please, I really want to hang out with you. I don't remember if I actually ended up getting her. I feel like I did not, but that's what I really needed. And I think that those cross-grade relationships, specifically for students of color, is probably the best thing that can happen for them. But what sucks about our schools is that I don't know if it's a high school thing or if it's a PWI thing, but people are very reluctant to do cross-grade sort of friendships. In college, that's an automatic. You're in classes with sophomores and juniors, you're gonna be friends with them. But yeah, so that was definitely the most helpful. Then Deus was my thing. I loved going there. Yes. Do
you want to say what Deus is?
It's the Diversity Awareness Initiative for students.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, for students. And so basically it was again, open to anybody, but specifically for students of color, and it would rotate different private schools in the city, and it's open to if you come from any school, but it would like be hosted at private school, so it would happen one Friday out of the month. We would all get together, like tons and tons of students of color. Like you would never see this like at an actual PWI institution, and we all just got together and talked about different topics. There would be a different topic every session, and that just being in that space, not even like talking to anybody, not even making friends or whatever, it was just being in that space was really what felt so good, because you don't get that on a daily basis at a PWI. So yeah, so that was definitely the most helpful. And then I also took a gap semester. I did a semester in California, and I needed to get away from Riverdale. Like, definitely what's wonderful about predominantly white institutions is that they have like a lot of opportunities, and like public schools don't get to do gap semesters or years abroad. And so I say, especially for students of color, take advantage of that. Let them get out of their school for a little bit, especially if you're starting them in kindergarten, if you're starting them in middle school. Like, they need a break. They need to see who they are outside of these institutions. They need to be able to get away from that, and I could not have been happier that I did that. So yeah, those are definitely some things that really helped me. And of course, having parents that like show up all the time, had my back, were like, if you need me to go get somebody, if you need me to go snatch somebody, like, I got you, I'm going to be there. So yeah, those are definitely the most helpful things.
I just want to mention we have like about 4 minutes left at this session before we go into our school fair. If there are any other questions left over, or if you would like to have like last comments, and I would like to know, honestly, when you got into college, like, where are those spaces? How did you find the space for your mental health part? Like, I know therapy's there, but I know like do they have that spaces for the schools that you were in, and did it feel authentic for you? That's a heavy duty question, I know, within 3 minutes, but that was just what I had in my mind.
Off, Adia.
I don't think our school still does an adequate enough job. I can literally firmly say none of the Black students and most of the students of color don't use our schools like therapeutic resources, because they're just wildly problematic, and it takes a lot for you to have a problem that is unique to our community and then have to translate that to a white person that asks you 1,000 questions when you just want to like go through your experience and be able to process it. So I found that we are our best form of therapy and understanding. I have found that like the queer Black community on campus also does a really good job of holding each other together, and that we've pretty much become our own resource. And also the African American Studies Department faculty members also do a great job of helping us out.
So Brown actually does have a really great therapy CAPS. We call it CAPS. It's like counseling and psychological services. Like, they're very speedy with getting people appointments, and you can request a person of color, which is like flat out. Like, the first time I did CAPS, which actually wasn't until quarantine, I was like, I need a person of color, and they were just like, okay, bet, no questions asked, here you go. And that definitely helped a lot, because again, there's a lot of things that you don't have to communicate when you're talking to a person of color sometimes. But sometimes, skin folk ain't always kin folk, as we know, but she definitely was. And I just could not sit in front of like a white woman, God forbid a white man, trying to explain all this stuff. Like, no. And then also just like, honestly, just other students of color on campus, upperclassmen, those people have been my haven, going to being just in small groups and spaces with them, doing a pre-college orientation program for students of color, or for like any sort of like affinity space that you identify with. Super, super wonderful, and really eased me into the social life of college. And I'm just glad that I got that like kind of cocoon of Black people before, like, as they called it, the snowstorm came in. So yeah, I think that's what's been most helpful so far.
Oh, good. That's good to know. Good to know. I have a brother that's going to college, but I told him to take a gap year, so that's good to know.
I mean, right about now
is the best thing. We got nothing but time. But I do want to respect the space that we have and the time that you guys put forth in this. And I thank you so much for participating, and everybody else who joined. If you have any questions, I'm sure the information or any contacts are given into the flyers or your emails, whatever you have. But that is all that we have for this session. Thank you for joining. And please make sure you get to the school fairs. That's in the next sessions that are coming up. And be well.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you, Trina, and thank
you.
you, Adia.
Thank you.
Yes.
Love you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Join
Bye,
Independent Trust if you're not.
Facts, facts.
Yes.
All right.
Enjoy the school
Okay.
fair, y'all. Bye.